Okay, and this time we are still continue the previous sections that we have made of that Robert. And this time we're just going to add a submachine gun for Robert. So I separate the project from the previous one and let's continue making the hard surface. Well, the only difference is from the last project I have made actually is we can see that I just install another two add-ons for Blender. The first one is the clean panel. As we can go to the preferences and select it, we can go to the object clean panels. Well, we can just have our own customization of those add-ons, since we can make it become even much more friendly to our MAM toolbars in order to do not want to make it a little bit too messy. So I just uncheck those panels, pie menus, or toggle filters, but I only want to check on the unpanel categories. So you can check the use sticky pop-ups, and every time if you have some new add-ons, you can just click the add button, and then there will be a lot of already installed add-ons. We can just choose to add to that category. Any kind of categories, we can just rename it as our own daily use. So I just got them being separated into different classes, so we can see from it. After we have got everything down, for example, there will be a new menu being created. For example, like to switch all those kind of add-ons we have already installed. If we do not do it, that if we switch out the filter, you can see that there are a lot of things, but it's really too messy, and I don't think would be nice for you, since different kind of project actually will not use all the add-ons. For example, like in the later process, we may just use the environment creation or the special effect creations in Blender to make our scene become huge enough, and each of them probably may just be set into the final compositing. So we may do not need to use all those kind of add-ons, and for example, like if we only need to make those kind of sifiguns, we will switch on the filter and toggle on the hard surface editing atoms. So the most atoms I'm going to use as box cutter and the hot apps machine and the sci-fi extrude, Bluetooth, and shipwright. So these are the main things I'm just going to use, and another new items that I have installed actually is the when we just press the Y button, there will be the mesh machine. So actually it should also be one of the things inside it. Let's see if I already activated inside it, but you can see that the mesh machine, if we go to the hot surface panel, we search for the mesh machine. Maybe actually this is only the shortcut add-on, so I do not need to be sure extra under the property panel, so we can do not need to care about it. So this is the previous one I have already made. Actually, If we switch on the wireframe, the general master is just the same as the one I make that Robert. Well, so let's continue making this one. And there are also some mesh machines that such kind of gears was being extra stick down to the surface of it. So we can see that maybe over this part the mesh is really densey, but we can also, for example, if we do not need to make it so yes, we can only switch select those part. If we go to the wireframe mode and we only select those parts that we need, and then we do not need to worry about the opposite part since I've already activated on the hot ops mirror, so it will just disregard it. We just press by distance and increased the value a little bit, so it may just remove some unnecessary things that we do not want. And then we just go to the object mode again to see both parts will just work the same at that. And then if we found some problems on the for example, as we can see, since some of the edges will just be in messy, so if we need to solve the shading problems, we only mark those shapes, so it will just be alright like that. And for some of the points that if we do not need to cut down, we can also just, for example, like the interior part. But if we really do not need to care too much about the faces count, we may just disregard it and just keep it the same as before. So after several steps to reverse, we can return it to its original part. So let's move to the next one is the lower part of this submachine gun. Maybe the currently issue is we do not have a reference image. So most of the counter designs were just being displayed in our mind, just like drawing a picture. So we may just design it simultaneously while we got it being created in the 3D viewports. I want to add some extra boolean as the add type to make this part a little bit dancey. So I create some extra point. For example, like we can directly press Y and we choose some plugins. Everything, some of them are needed, and actually it depends on the extra plugins that you have installed by buying those kind of extra items from the blend market. So most of them are used for, well, if you think some of them are not, maybe we can also pretty suggest it that we can use the most basic part. Actually, the free versions by those kind of tools actually is already enough for our normal creation. Some extra points like those kind of sets may also be used for if we want to add some more complicated one, but currently I do not recommend to add too much complicated themes, so which may make the whole thing become a little bit not in accordance with our general idea to designing those kind of weapons. So we just press D to use the box cutter, and we use this one and use join. We can create anything we want. Like I just directly want to carry such kind of things like that, and then I just move it here like. It may seems to be a little bit weird, but it doesn't matter. We can just fix the shading problems later. So we're using the average scroll to set this one and move this part inside to make it join the whole part of it. And then we can go to the edit mode to change its general shape. For example, if we want to make it become rather, or we can use the RZ to see if the whole part has already been merged into the main part of the weapon. We press Ctrl and boy to add some bevel for it. Then as for this part, we can also use, and then we press bevel, but not too much, only a little bit will be just enough, like that. And then we can also copy this one and press Shift and D to make it a little bit like the same areas, a little bit smaller. We shift click the main part of our body. When we activated Bluetooth, we can use Ctrl plus add, then to make another join boolean again. So when these two parts will just be made, the opposite one will just be the same. And then we can actually, we can see there are a lot of modifiers used. We use both the bevel. For example, we use the sharp, and we use the weight, and then the normal transfer. And we can also use the weight and normal, but you may just be a little bit curious about the position that how they were just being plated. That actually the normal transfer we can see is actually, for example, like such kind of object like this one, actually it will just be used created from those mesh machines. So in order to make those kind of newly added parts being perfectly merged into our main body, there will be some shading problems over the surrounding areas. So we have to use the normal transfer modifier to deal with it, and we can just use it later when I just got it being displayed. So do not worry about it. So the first one, we need to fix these problems. The next one is the two booleans we can find is just that two types. And then the hard ops mirrors will just put it over there, and the weight normal will just be placed at the last. Well, we can also just try to make the weight normal in front of the normal transfer, but this area we can see if we move there, you can see there may just be some of change since the weight normal will overwhelm the normal transfer, which means that the normal transfer will no longer be activated, or the effect will not be displayed over it. It will be overridden by the weight normal. So we just can also move it to the last part to see some change. For example, like this part, maybe the changes are a little bit tiny and not become so visible. So it depends on you. Then we apply those two booleans. We press Ctrl A and Ctrl A to apply those two boolean types, and these two case colors we can just use hide. So to deal with the such problems, the first one is we can fix some of the points that we may not need it if the edges are really too close to each other. So we can, the first thing we can do actually is just fixing those edges. I do not use the automatically sharpen or the automatic sharpen it by angle, since we'll just destroy the overall curvature. So I just keep the hard edges manually. Then we use the X and the limited dissolve. Select all boundaries, that should be okay. And then we press 1 to see some of the changes. That should be no problem. And same as the rest of this one. I choose all of them. The edges are really important, and press X limited dissolve. So to delay some of the unnecessary vertices, we can manually correct some of the very closed areas to make them be merged together. For example, like this one. Then when all those things were just being made, we can mark manually for those kind of connected surrounding rings. Then we use Q, and then we can fix the shading problems. And then the next one is, for example, some of the points that really have some problems, we can just dissolve edges. And this one also. Q mark. So when those two was being made, actually it seems to be the same as those two parts, right? And then if we need some more extra details over that two areas, we can also manually do it. For example, like select those two and press I. To thicken those areas, we can press W, loop tools. We can choose, or we can use smooth vertices to clean it. Then we move it inside. And for this part, we can manually use Q mark, and this one also. Press I, and those areas, Ctrl V, smooth vertices. Then we use extrude inside. Select the surrounding one. Press Q mark. And as for the interior part, we may also choose both of them and Q mark. Okay, that's done. So actually these were the general shape that they were actually being connected together. The next thing is I want to create another main thing to gotta be installed on the SAT kit. So I just use the Bluetooth, and then we press dock, and actually, if we do not select the gun, we just directly create an object on the ear, so we can use this one, and then we'll just be created. Then we select one and sample. We're going to remove its size, change its size to fit it the magazine socket. Just make it a little bit larger, and move it over there like that, but just a little bit inside. Okay, when this was just being made, I go to the edit mode, and these two also move it inside. Then press Alt X and select this mirror point to keep the origin in the center of the mask, so that the hot-ups mirror automatically calculate its mirror axis. So we're just going to add some bevel for it, like that one, and maybe these whole faces. We control boy to add a bevel for it. And then in order to make it looks to be reliable, and you also need to add some extra things on it. For example, like these two things need to be use the box cutter, we use join, then we create something like that. Okay, and then we use the ever scroll, go to the edit mode, we move it up, and as for this one, we move it down, select this edge, we move it outside a little bit, and then we create a loop. And something like that. As for this part, and we're going to add a bevel. As for this whole part, we can use a much lazy master by directly press Q and use sharpen. Let them do it automatically. We switch off the cutter, and then there may seems to be some shading problems, but then we can just fix it later, and you don't need to worry too much about the current process. Then we still use the cutter, because as we can see that for this part there are not too many curvature shapes, so we may use the automatic sharpen instead of do it manually to save our time, since if there are a lot of curvatures, the automatic sharpens may mark those shapes incorrectly, and some places may stop in the sun edges will be continued, but these areas are not the one we want. So maybe at length we still have to fix in all those sharpen edges manually. So we can just do it in advance or do it later. But only depends on you whether you want to do it later or in advance. Press dock and use the cut. Then we move it inside. To cut things like that, use the ever scroll. We select our cutter. We go to this mode, and we can just move it. Press double G. Move it over that, like that. And as for the interior part, we can also add some bevel for it, like these two. We control boy, but not too much. Maybe segment that 2 will be enough. You can use sharpen, and then we can also add a bevel for it. For example, like we use bevel and press shift. We change the segment to, we can see, go to the bevel, can change segment to 2 and make it smaller. But if there's some problems, we can also change it larger, maybe 3 to fix it. But all of them was just being done automatically. If you think there's some problems, we can just move it a little bit. Since we do not want to make those faces being much closer. For example, if we switch on the wireframe too much closer to the edge, so that will cause some problems, since the edges of those kind of bevels we have already made actually do not need to touch the edge to another side. So when this was done, we can also choose the bevel type as. We can go to geometry, you can choose the arc. Actually, it has already suggested for us like the arc, and segment we can just change it a little bit smaller to reduce the burden of the resources overload. Switch off the wireframe. Then we continue the overall shape of this magazine. We want to make this part a bit bigger, so, and as for the this part also, we want to make it a little bit outside of it, so we can add something like that. We go to the edit mode, or we can just directly press dock and use this one, use the join button. And then we create one like that. It seems to be ugly, but doesn't matter. We use the ever scroll, choose this one, and go to edit mode. Go to face mode and move it inside. When this was being made, I go to the edit mode and make it a little bit smaller. We press Control boy to add a bevel for it, and as for this part, I want to Control boy, add a bevel for it. So as long as there's some extra shapes, it makes look to be a little bit nicer. And we can also go to this one and move it outside a little bit. Then we Control boy to add another one. So this shape was easily being made out like that. But as for this one, I also want to extrude a little bit and then move it a little bit closer. Move it inside like that. And as for the interior part, to make a general shape. And as for this area, I also want to use a bevel with a segment of 2 to make a shape like that. As for this part, we can also manually change it, the geometry. So when this was just being made, we can take a look on its overload to see it. If it was no problem, we can remove the cutter and then we use sharpen when the bevel was also being made like that. So if there was nothing need to be fixed manually, we just move on. We go to the edit mode to see actually, as for this part, can also be made a little bit smoother. We switch on the proportional editing and GX. And move it inside. Then there's some problems over this part, but it doesn't matter. We can just fix it later. When this area just being made, I can see that the front part is a little bit ugly. You can also add some extra tips in it. For example, like something like we press dock and use the joint. We add a circle for it. Move it outside. Q, arrow scroll. You go to edit mode, select that face, switch up the proportional editing, and makes it look like that. And for this part, you can also add another and switch it off. When this will just be made, we use sharpen again. Make sure that the bevel was just being put at the last, so it will just take effect on all those kind of building we have already made. We're going to add some wires from this part into the interior side. So we move our cursor over there, click it, and go to the curve. We add a pass. Can make it number a little bit smaller, for example 0.1. We turn it around and then go to the pass. We can go to the geometry and add steps. We move it a little bit larger, maybe like that. So I go to the edit mode. This one we press Shift S. If we have already installed the M3 tools, I just kept on being activated like those kind of menu pies. All those kind of settings can go to the preferences, and then we just choose machine 3 tools. You can do there a lot of settings we can just work in it. Generally speaking, I just go to the general and some of the settings I recommend you to switch on a smart face, align, surface line, mode pies, align pies, and creation and origin pies. This will actually, I think, will just be pretty useful for me to use during my daily work on the hard surface cutting project. We press Shift and S, and then we just move it to cursor like that. And then we're going to press our cursor over there, select this one, Shift S to cursor, Then the next part, we can move it down a little bit around. And then that should just be okay. And to make it fit much better, we can subdivide that. And as for this part, you can do like that. You can move it a little bit closer in the interior part. This one also. And we can also make it go to the average scroll, set this one, and go to the edit mode to make it a little bit bigger. That should be better. And this one will just be made, we can copy it. For example, we shift S to geometry, and then we use mirror. We choose the object at that one, so to copy it to the other side like that. So this one will just be made like that. And we continue editing this part. Actually, I think as for those parts can also be added at bevel. We can choose one. Then we'll just be made like that. It should looks to be a little bit nicer. And there's some problems. We scroll it and move it a little bit ahead to switch it up. Then we're just being fixed. And then there will be much more part we can just work from that. For example, we can also add another cut over there. Then we can use the average scroll, choose this one, go to the edit mode. We only just need to cut a little, so like that. This one, we move it a little bit downstairs, and it should not be bad. But I think that one should just also go up a little bit more. And to make some shape a little bit nicer, we select that to 3 edges, and we add a bevel for it 2 times, so it just looks to be a rounded one like that. We sharpen it, and as for that 2 part, it still need to be made for, and then we can do something like we can also add some extra object, like why we can choose some plugin. For example, like this one, but it will just be made in the mirror version, so we just need to be a little bit careful when we make it.